Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode 261. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson-Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good morning, members, subscribers, listeners, and viewers. Coming at you live and in person together, we are getting into a brand new, let's call it entrepreneur and origin story today, Mike, aren't we?
We are, and I'm feeling very shapely as we do this.
Yeah, well, that's very, very convenient because I think today we're going to be leaning into the creation and the thought process behind a particular shapewear brand, Mike. In fact, that brand is going to be Spanx, as well as founder Sara Blakely, who particularly came out into the spotlight, shall we say, as far back as 2000, Mike, when her product Spanx, which many of our viewers, listeners, and subscribers will be aware of, really came to light when Oprah celebrated it as a product to take a look at. Since then, Mike, that brand has pretty much exploded into other variations of shapewear. It's now into all sorts of activewear as well. But what a fantastic opportunity to see the example of an entrepreneur behind a brand and product that's really captured the attention of people and women all around the world.
Yeah, and I think this show particularly, Mark, the story of Sara Blakely and Spanx is talking to so many of the key ideas that you and I have discovered together in the Moonshots podcast, together with our members and our viewers and our listeners. So if you like the idea of finding your purpose and ikigai, or maybe you're not sure if you're on track, this show's for you. If you're not sure where to go towards, you know what you're doing ain't quite right, but you don't know what is right, this show's for you. And most importantly, test, learn, iterate, overcoming uncertainty. All of that is in the story of Sara Blakely. It is such a unique story where failure was embraced, uncertainty was embraced, and hey, we all feel it, but from someone like Sara Blakely, we can know how to conquer it.
Whoa, Mike, what an introduction. If we have enticed our listeners and viewers around this story of perseverance, innovation, and disruption, I'd say we're probably ready to go in our first clip straight away. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, I'm feeling I want to reshape my thinking about these concepts, so let's crack in.
Perfect. Well, boy, do I have a shapely clip that's going to introduce us to the idea of Sara Blakely and her drive to create Spanx. Let's get straight into this concept that Sarah's going to break down for us, which is authentic success.
Sara Blakely is the inventor of a product that you've probably heard of, at least you females have probably heard of it, called Spanx. She debuts on the billionaires list. She's the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world. She went from $5,000 in savings at age 29 to age 41 running a company that's worth $1 billion, and she owns all of it.
For me, I feel like money just makes you more of who you already were. It just holds a magnifying glass up to the person that you are. I don't subscribe at all to money as the root of all evil. I think money is a wonderful thing, and it's great to share, and it's fun to spend, and it's fun to make, and I've always had a very positive outlook about what money can do. I had always thought I would be a lawyer growing up, and so I took the LSAT. I basically failed it. And I remember at that moment it being this life-changing moment that set me on a different course. And the way that I initially handled it was try again. I took the course, I tried it again, and then when it didn't go as I planned, I asked myself a lot of questions. What is life trying to tell me? Do I have a different path? Maybe I'm supposed to be open to something else. And that's what set me on the journey that ended up creating Spanx.
A good bra and a pair of Spanx is the holy grail.
A pair of Spanx can change your world.
I think what surprised me the most with the Spanx journey is the emotional impact that this brand and these products have had on women's lives. I just didn't expect that. I was looking for no panty lines and a smooth look in white pants, and women literally are incredibly emotionally impacted and moved by our brand, and that's an amazing feeling.
Without Spanx, I wouldn't be wearing this skirt.
They're a lifesaver, always.
I'm wearing them right now.
We thank God for Sara and Spanx.
Spanx has been around now for 10 and a half years, almost 11 years. Can you talk us through a little bit about what moments of your career so far that you're most proud of achieving?
The things that I'm most proud of achieving are achieving this level of success that is beyond my wildest dreams and doing it in a way that I feel like I can still look myself in the mirror and feel really good about how I got here. My Oprah moment, getting the call from her, my first chance to sell my second product on QVC and selling over 8,000 in 6 minutes and realizing I'm not a one-hit wonder. And then launching internationally, building a team. There were different moments where it just started feeling like I was so proud of different stages of the Spanx journey.
Can you tell us a bit about who's influenced you in your path to success?
The people that have been most influential to me, other than my family, have been Wayne Dyer, Oprah Winfrey, and Richard Branson. Wayne Dyer, he mentored me from afar, basically through these CDs, and taught me how to think in a way that I think allowed me to live up to the potential of myself that I am at this point in my life.
You know, the thing here, Mark, she has already kind of gone the entire entrepreneur's journey from the calling, being in the wilderness, facing the challenge, having to transform herself. And now she's sharing with us how she did it. It really is it's a great case study there. I think what's exceptional about what we're seeing from her is that she is giving us an insight into the steps that she made. And I think what we're realizing is she faced all the same challenges that we face in our everyday life. So this for me is a playbook. I mean, she, off the start there, she's failed the exam twice, not just one time, but twice. And did you notice how at ease she was to say, yep, failed twice? And I think that's a clue to her approach. She doesn't hold any guilt or shame for failure. She's like, oh, so the universe was trying to tell me something. Yeah. And I think right now at this stage, what we're seeing is if we are open to the messages that are coming to us, I think statistically speaking, there's a good chance there's a lot of people listening, watching, or members of this show, the Moonshots Podcast, who might be feeling they're not quite on track. And I think what we can see is absolute proof that anyone and everyone can get back on track if they follow the Sara Blakely playbook.
Look, I totally agree, Mike. I think this story from Sara is one of success. You know, we heard that she's the youngest billionaire. She went from $5,000 at the age of 29 to a billionaire at 41. But really, I think the magic of the Sara Blakely story and why it's such an attractive one to kind of lean into and learn from and be inspired by is through that element of failure. She's gone into that wilderness, like you say, and that really reminds, I think, both of us of Brené Brown, you know, with the idea of daring greatly, the idea of exposing yourself to things that you're uncomfortable with and accepting when failure does happen. It's okay to fail, like Sara said, the LSAT. Maybe that just wasn't her path that was going to work best for her. And I think it's encouraging when we put it in the context of Sara being such a successful entrepreneur and businesswoman, it was still born out of, you know, arguably failure that then led her to figuring out what path she should be on. And this, you know, courageous journey that she's gone on, not allowing that failure to hold her back, not allowing her to sit back and say, oh, poor me, I didn't get through, so therefore I'm going to be dissatisfied with everything I do for the rest of my career or take it out on others. Instead, she kind of utilized it as, we're going to find out in some of the other clips, an opportunity to really ask herself, what is it that I'm good at? What is it that I want to go out and create in the world? And that can only really happen, I think, from failure, can't it? When you have to readjust yourself based on something that doesn't quite work, you're then able to go out and find the thing that does work.
Yeah. So let's do this exercise together. Let's try and identify moments in our life where we felt like we've not been on track. And let's kind of try and pinpoint this moment, because to get the most out of Sara's story, I think it's important to identify the moments that relate to what she did when she, and what we're going to see as well, is when she wasn't feeling on track, she took action, right? But before you take action, you have to acknowledge and capture the moments where you're like, I'm not sure I'm on track in life, right?
Yeah.
Which of these do you think is most common, either for yourself or for others? Here's a list of signs that you're not living a life of purpose, right? Lack of motivation, feeling empty, restlessness, disconnection from your personal values, unfulfilling relationships, boredom, low energy, maybe a little bit of envy of others, or feeling trapped. Which one do you think is the most common that people experience?
I reckon the most common that I've experienced in others is probably that lack of motivation combined with a sort of subtle taster of envy.
Yeah.
This idea of jealousy of why have my superiors got more freedom? Why have my superiors got more control?
Yeah.
Which then leads into that lack of motivation to maybe try a little bit less hard. I think that really is the combination in my mind of leading to that kind of dissatisfied person in the workplace, because that leads to either poor me, or it leads to that feeling of, injustice, right? That is always an uncomfortable feeling. Well, what about you when you were reading those out? Which one spoke to you, or which one felt really familiar?
Oh, so similar to yourself, but I guess the way I've experienced it is kind of getting to the end of the week and feeling like you worked really hard, but not having a sense of fulfillment, not having a sense of I've contributed meaningful things in the world, just feeling like, what the hell am I doing? Like I've just like it almost because I can only be all in or nothing. Like I don't do very well in between. Like for me, it's when I can't grab, like it seems to almost get worse because I've worked so hard, yet feel so unfulfilled from it. The gap feels massive.
That lack of personal alignment to your values. You're working hard, maybe not seeing that.
Just like, oh man, I am so far away from what I like. I have to drag myself every millimeter. Whereas, the thing that it also it's a bit tricky is if we've all had moments where we feel like we're really on track, right? So you're also like, I know what it feels like when I'm on fire.
Yeah. So why don't I have it now?
Where the hell's it gone?
Isn't that an uncomfortable feeling? And it's quite confronting, isn't it?
Dude, it's like, why am I on this planet kind of feeling?
Yeah,
like,
I'm still putting in the same amount of work, but for some reason it's not landing. What's going on? It's very uncomfortable, isn't it? And I think
I think what happens, sorry to jump in there, but I think what happens is we often deny this feeling. We don't explore it. So that's why when you and I were researching the show, according to Gallup, 90% of the people worldwide feel unfulfilled in their daily lives and work.
90%.
Isn't that crazy? 70% of working Americans are unhappy in their current job. Like, oh my gosh, this show is for like 3/4 of the planet.
That's absolutely mammoth.
That's mammoth, but I tell you what's even bigger is the contribution from our members, Mark.
Yes, I think hopefully what's evident to all of our members is the enjoyment that you and I and the Moonshots family get out of creating this show every single week. And we do it very much, Mike, with a single-minded idea in our heads. And that's really to celebrate each of our members every single week and also explore and learn out loud together with them. So please welcome in, as always, our members. And thank you to Bob, Niles, iTripped and Dietmar, Marjan, Connor, Lisa and Sid, Mr. Bonjour, Paul, Berg, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samuela and Barbara, Deborah, Lasse, Steve, Craig, Ravi, Yvette, Raul, Nikawara, Ingram, Dirk, Venkata, Marco, Jet, Roger, Stefan, Raw, Nimalen, James, Diana, Christoph, Denise, Laura, Smitty, Corey, Daniela, and Mike, our annual members. High fives to all of you guys. You rock our world. Along with Antonio, Zachary, Austin, and Fred, Ola, Andy, Diana, and Margie, Ron, Jasper, and Fabian. Thank you guys so much for supporting our Moonshot show every single week, and our Moonshots family sends you all high fives and our best wishes regarding supporting the show.
So we are very grateful for your contributions. It really does help us pay all the different bills that we have to take care of in order to get this show to you, as well as the Moonshots Master Series. So if you become a member, you get access to that as well. So head over to moonshots.io. You'll find your groove just like Sara Blakely did as well. Now, we're going to get down to business, Mark. I think in this next set of clips, we're going to get into the real gnarly, tough stuff about confronting failure, finding purpose, and doing the work of learning. And where do you want to start us on this journey?
Well, we've kind of set the scene, haven't we? We know the success of Sara. We understand the product and where that's somewhat been born out of. But I think, Mike, it would be a disservice to our members and our listeners, viewers, to not really now explore why it came about and where the strength of Sara really came from. So the next clip we've got is going to really lean into the creation and the thought process behind the product of Spanx, but more importantly, identify the journey that Sara went on in order to get there.
I am just a frustrated consumer. I had never worked in fashion, retail. I'd never even taken a business class. I grew up on a beach in Florida and wanted to wear this certain outfit that I hung in my closet, and everything showed underneath it. And as a woman, you know, I was like, your clothing is sort of the paint, and if you don't have the right canvas, it affects the painting. And so a lot of women that I knew struggled with, what do you really wear under these certain colors and these certain fabrics?
What was the event? What was the first event? I mean, do you remember that moment where you took the scissors and just, I mean, you could look at it as destruction, but I would look at it as construction.
Yeah, I at the time I was selling fax machines door to door, which, can you imagine, for 7 years. So I graduated from college and I'd been doing that, and I actually set an intention for my life that was very, you know, I had this moment where I had a really bad day of selling fax machines. People kicked me out of the offices all the time. I always had my business cards ripped up in front of my face when I was cold calling, and I pulled off the side of the road this one day and I just said, I'm in the wrong movie. Like, call the director, call the producer. This is not my life. How did this happen? And I went home that night and I wrote in my journal, what am I good at? And the one good thing in my good column was sales. And I started asking, like, what is it about sales that you like, Sara? And I realized I liked offering something to someone that either improved their life or that they needed. And I wrote, I want to invent a product that I can sell to millions of people that will make them feel good. And then I asked for an idea to come to me, and I waited 2 years. And so I only cut the feet out of my pantyhose one time to go to a party. I put it on under white pants with strappy, great heels, and it gave me a smooth look in my clothes, and you couldn't see any undergarments. And because I had set that intention and asked so specifically for my idea, I was ready. Like, anything that crossed my path, I was like, are you my idea? Like, maybe you're the idea I've asked for.
Well, Mark, that was a bit of a masterclass in Moonshot's thinking there. I mean, yes. I heard setting intentions, solving problems that she faced, very Richard Branson, setting intentions. I mean, talk about whether we go to Eckhart Tolle, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, or, you know, all of the positive thinking that we've seen in life. But what is the most powerful thing I think we can all relate to? She was able to admit she was in the wrong movie. Now, Mark, if I look at this research that I have here, I mean, I'm going to put it up on the screen for the viewers, because this is really crazy. Like, when we were talking about this, Mark, about this research before the show, we were shocked to see that Gallup has found, like, check this out, 90% of the world's not feeling fulfilled. So 90% of the world, Mark, are in the wrong movie.
90%.
right?
I still can't get over that.
70% of people working are unhappy and don't care for what they do. And Mark, millennials are noted as being the most unfulfilled and unhappy generation in the entire workforce. I mean,
Well, I apologize on behalf of my generation.
yes, and so you should. Us oldies, we're completely happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Mark, we are dealing with, if we do this as an exercise, we're dealing with essentially 9 out of 10 people do not do what Sara Blakely is talking about.
Yeah.
They're not saying I'm in the wrong movie. They are not taking a self-empowered perspective to start changing the reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's so powerful is she's like, I'm going to set this intention because I know I'm in the wrong movie, and I'm going to go out there. And she solved the problem. But it took her 2 years. Again, very Moonshots. She iterated, she tested, she learned, and then she found it. 2 years. This is so different to the allure of, well, I was in the shower and kaboom, I had $1 billion idea. It was hard work, grit, resilience. It was Angela Duckworth. It was David Goggins. 2 years, Mark. She was selling faxes door to door. And she flipped that into Spanx. If she can make that wild flip, imagine what each and every one of us can do. And there's a huge market. There's 9 out of 10 people. 9 out of 10, Mark. It's blowing me away.
It blew me away when we found that out earlier as well. And I think the story of Sara's journey to success is one to celebrate. As we know from creative individuals we've found out on the show, such as Austin Kleon, a lot of ideas take time to percolate and to rise up to the surface. And whether you're creating a product that's in shapewear, whether you're creating a book like Austin Kleon, maybe even we could go as far back in our Moonshots library as somebody like John Cleese with comedy. A lot of these elements come from patience. A lot of these come from having a clear-minded goal or intention in mind. I've already referenced, Jim Carrey and his visualization of success. A lot of these come down to ourselves, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got 70% of the workforce are unhappy in their jobs and 90% of people are pretty miserable about it, well, that is a huge opportunity for all of us to find inspiration ourselves. We don't just sit back and complain about the situation or the job that we're not really enjoying. Instead, get curious. I loved hearing from Sara there, and I'm sure our listeners and members are thinking the same. Oh, here we go. Mike and Mark are talking about journaling again. But what an interesting exercise and proof point in the value of an entrepreneur getting curious and being aware of the things that get them out of bed in the morning. She knew that she was good at sales, and she knew that she wanted to create a product that improved people's lives. Okay, fantastic. Suddenly the sites and the area of control are now much smaller. So therefore she knew, I just need to find something in this space that's going to make me more comfortable. That'll turn me from the 90% unhappy into that 10% who might be happy.
Yes.
And then that took another 2 years. So it wasn't overnight success, but it did take her to know about herself and do the hard work on her own time to then enable her to be aware and notice when the successful idea came around.
Right.
She was enough to notice it and grab it and then lean into it.
Yep.
And I think that would only come, Mike, as I'm sure you agree, from this idea of self-reflection and the awareness that comes with, getting curious about yourself.
Look, and I'll tell you the other thing that's going to take reflection along this journey that we all could go on, or at least 9 out of 10 of us, is that we're going to face some ups and a lot of downs. And in a funny way, like if you are experiencing some challenge, friction, or even as David Goggins would say, some suffering, the point here is then you're doing the right thing. Because if it's too easy, you're not stressing yourself, right? And if it's too easy, then chances are everyone else is doing it. So where we go to now is, we've had a story here of, I'm in the wrong movie, right? This is a really good platform setting the intention. But even after having her aha moment, she went for 2 years before she found it. And in that time of 2 years, she will have faced a lot of failure. And she brings us some very powerful thinking on this topic.
Yeah, she really does. Let's hear from Sara, really explore this concept of starting your own thing, but also those difficulties that can come with it. And as is often the case with some of the entrepreneurs, Mike, that we've studied on the show, this behavior and mindset comes from quite an early age. And there's a fantastic story here from Sara now, helping us understand where her drive with redefining failure really came from.
Growing up, my father used to ask my brother and me what we had failed at the dinner table, which was so interesting, and he'd celebrate it, and he'd actually be disappointed if I didn't have something that I failed at that week. So I can remember saying, Dad, I tried out for this and I was horrible, and he would actually high-five me and say, congratulations, way to go. And what it did was just reframe my definition of failure. Failure for me became not trying versus the outcome. So many people don't take risks for fear of failure. They don't start the business. They don't go create the art they want to create, or they don't go try out to be in the play or whatever it is for the fear of failure. And once you redefine that for yourself and realize the failure is just not trying, then life opens up to you in many ways. And I would also, my dad would encourage me anytime something didn't go the way I expected it to, or maybe I got embarrassed by a situation, to write down where the hidden gifts were and what I got out of it. And I started realizing in everything there was some amazing nugget that I wouldn't have wanted to pass up. At Spanx, to encourage people to fail, I'm bringing up my failures in front of the team often. So I will stand up and I call them the oops of Spanx. Some of them are the oops throughout the history of Spanx. Some of them can be recent oops that I did, but I'm always openly talking about it. If you're gonna have a oops, part of the beauty of it is twofold. If there's a failure quote or an oops in your life, if you learn from it and if you can laugh about it, then it's all worth it.
It really is true. It is worth it, because I think how many times have we seen, like Thomas Edison and the light bulb? Like he did 10,000 prototypes. James Dyson and the vacuum cleaner did thousands of prototypes in the backyard. The point here is these are all people like Sara that flipped failure. And they're like, oh, actually, failure is not you could call it a learning or an insight. And if you use that to define what you're going to do next, well, if that failed, well, what should I do next? What might work then? And it becomes sort of like you're unshackled from the guilt and the shame of failure. And then you're like curious and like, oh, I don't care if I fail, because it just means I'm improving the odds of success, because every failure means you're a bit closer to success, right?
I love the idea, the way that failure comes to me nowadays, once we've explored those different entrepreneurial journeys, Mike, as you've just mentioned, is failure can create a map. And in the times when I've become really uncomfortable with work, when things have gone wrong or things have failed, so to speak, and I felt lost, demotivated, kind of you're out at sea without a sail, you don't know which way is which, what do I do now? However, when you start to get curious and actually embrace failure, and as Sara puts it, you start to redefine it, suddenly you feel as though you have a little bit of a map. And when things go wrong next time, you think, oh, okay, yeah, I recognize this. I kind of know how this feels, or I kind of know what I need to do next. I need to let it run off my back like a duck, the water off a duck's back. I need to not let this affect me personally, and I need to not let it affect my confidence to try something else. And by getting curious and going into this journey of creation, whether it's a product or just going into your day job in order to find the happiness, I think knowing and celebrating those failures really does give you a little bit of confidence to be able to go out and do it again. Right. Because as you point out, we're all going to run into failure. It's the only guarantee that we will have in our life. It's going to get hard. There will be times when you need to be resilient or have grit. But I think by looking at the things that have maybe gone wrong, it gives you that little bit of grounding and that little bit of foundation to then see those negative moments come. And you think, okay, well, that's okay. I know I have the strength inside to deal with it. How do you, when you hear this story of redefining failure and this idea of high-fiving it, what kind of comes to your mind, Mike?
I want to play another game. So here we go, Mark. On the screen, let's have some fun. Here we got 10 tips for embracing failure. I'm going to read them out, and you're going to pick your favorite one and tell us why you love it. So how to embrace failure. Number 1, reframe failure as a learning opportunity. 2, cultivate resilience. 3, accept responsibility. 4, stay positive. 5, set realistic expectations. 6, seek feedback. 7, celebrate efforts, not just results. 8, keep trying. 9, learn from others' failure. And 10, practice self-compassion. If you had to choose one of those to help you embrace failure, a la Sara Blakely, which one of these lists, which one gets your pick?
Blimey, I got to admit, actually, all of these are pretty good, Mike. And I think we've probably done a show or at least a clip in our back catalogue that speaks to every single one of them.
Might be right.
They're all good. I reckon the key is number 8, lucky number 8, with the idea of keep trying.
Yeah.
I think not letting a single moment or a single comment or a single email be enough to unbalance your ship.
Yeah.
And then mean that you lose motivation and you lose the ability to care.
Yeah.
What about you? Which one, to turn the mic back around to you, of those fantastic 10, actually, I'm going to have to take a screenshot of those later. Which one really speaks to you, Mike?
Well, before I can keep trying, which I do like from you, I have to reframe number 1.
Yeah.
Like to me, the saying, heading it off at the pass, like I have to quickly grab it and go, okay, it's just a learning. It's cool. I can build on this, because my temptation is go, damn, like that's like when something doesn't work. So I have to intercept it before I can go to the whole keep trying thought. I got to go, okay, what did I learn? Because when I ask what did I learn, then I naturally go, okay, well, what will I do next? And I'll keep trying, right?
Yeah, you're totally right, because then you contextualize that failure or that issue, and then you can think, okay, well, maybe if I did it this way next time, it'll be a little bit better. Or maybe if I have a little bit more compassion for somebody else, maybe it'll go slightly differently. I think that's the journey that we're all on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Learning from those mistakes, not letting them bog us down and slow us down, whether it's product creation or just being happy at work. It's about not being in denial, I think, isn't it?
And what's quite interesting is if you look at this list here, I think we've, as you said, done a show on books, experts or superstars or academics that have actually studied all of these things. So if you are interested in some of these topics, I think the way to kind of dig in further on this, if you're enjoying the Sara Blakely story, I'd head to moonshots.io and I would look up the shows for Carol Dweck on mindset, Angela Duckworth on grit, Brené Brown, Daring Greatly. Who else comes to mind? Would you recommend to our listeners to look up?
I'd recommend, because the story of Sara Blakely is one around creation, I think the Creativity series can inspire a little bit of guidance and reassurance. You know, I'd mentioned John Cleese earlier.
Elizabeth Gilbert. We haven't mentioned her.
Elizabeth Gilbert, for me, is a firm favorite, particularly this idea of originality. So the argument, as our listeners may have heard already on our show, is the concept of ideas having already been done versus the idea of you doing it for the first time. And I think you doing it for the first time is very much where Sara Blakely is inspiring us here today.
Yeah.
You go out and give it a go, see what you learn from it, even if that leads to you to go out and create maybe a different product or go out and behave differently at work. That process of giving it a go is the most important lesson that you can do. And Elizabeth Gilbert really speaks, in my mind, to this concept of going out, having a crack and seeing what you learn from it.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're in the brace for having a crack at things and getting on with them, we've got one more clip, and this is like taking the plunge clip. This is like burn the boats, full guns blazing. Mark, why don't you set up this last clip from Sara Blakely?
This last clip from Sara really embraces this journey that I think we've discovered along the process of hearing about Spanx and Blakely's story of becoming, such a young billionaire from arguably a much lower position. So let's hear and end on a high, Mike. Let's hear from Sara Blakely one more time, helping us understand and actually embrace the concept of not knowing.
I like to say that the big secret behind disruption is not having any idea how it's supposed to be done. I had no idea how it was supposed to be done. And if you have no idea how something's supposed to be done, I guarantee you will end up being disruptive. But the key is you have to let it, you have to embrace not knowing. A lot of times when we don't know something, especially, most people in society, we end up being afraid of what we don't know, or we take that as a negative. It can hold us back. Whereas if you let what you don't know become your greatest asset, you are bound to do things very differently. Because we're all mostly on autopilot in life. And if you think about it, we're doing things exactly the way somebody else showed us how to do it. Everything that we're doing is because someone else showed us how to do it. So I like to do this mental exercise, and I tell people at Spanx to do it too. I say, close your eyes and pretend like you have no idea how to do your job. Just sit in that space for a minute. What comes up? If no one has shown you how to do your job, how would you be doing it? And listening to the answers. But it takes asking those questions, asking why, and spending that time in that space to say, is there a better way? Why has a bra always been made this way? Or why is it this way? And so for me, my not knowing was really a great asset for me.
This is really interesting because what I think she's getting into is all our bias, right?
Yeah.
She's really like, we approach problems with, if the solution's probably this, which is the same as everyone else is thinking. What she's really trying to do here is force us, this would be classic, what we would call blue sky thinking, really blank canvas thinking, and to ask, is there a different way? I mean, this is so iconically the Apple brand campaign from many decades ago of Think Differently. This is really a celebration of that, because so often we rush to like the first thing that comes to our mind, which might be very obvious. It may be right. But if you really challenge yourself to say, well, how could we do this in a unique way? How could we have a competitive advantage? Or how could we disrupt things in a very crowded, mature market by doing something radically different? Right? And that takes courage, because the risk-free way is doing it the same way everyone else is doing it. Or the classic thing is you hire McKinsey and they tell you what to do. So you can well, that's what McKinsey told me to do, right?
Yeah.
Heaven forbid you yourself actually said, why don't we just do it differently like this?
Yeah, I think that sometimes comes from maybe a lack of direction or innovation. Maybe it's actually the ability to point the finger at somebody else if it goes wrong.
Right.
So a lack of responsibility, as I think was one of the options that was on your list of 10 a minute ago. What this reminds me of is Austin Kleon again. This idea of eyes closed, just take your time, really remove the context and what you already know in order to think differently. Don't worry what's come before. Don't worry about what other people have succeeded at. Don't let that be the flagpole in the ground that then marks what success really is. Because again, we might look online and think this person is rich from crypto, or this person has overnight a six-pack. And instead, those markers of success may not actually be what's relevant to you and I as markers of success in our own lives. And going back to that great data point that you had earlier, Mike, with the 90% people being unhappy, I would assume that a lot of those people would say they're unhappy because they're comparing themselves to others.
Yes.
Which again, as we know from somebody like Jordan Peterson, the idea of knowing what other people have succeeded at should not necessarily be what you and I are listening.
It's not your measure. He goes on in that thinking to talk about everybody has their own unique context and situation. So maybe you had challenges that others didn't. So it's crazy. The only person you can compare yourself to is the person you were yesterday. And I think that's really powerful thinking from him.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, a big story here, Mark, of setting intentions, acknowledging that you're in the wrong movie, flipping this whole idea of failure, and then jumping into the unknown. I mean, she took 2 years before she had Spanx. 2 years. Yeah. I think most of us would have run for the hills after 2 months.
You're right. You're right. This idea of longevity and patience, I think, is probably what puts off a lot of entrepreneurs. Yeah. They want, again, that success.
So from the ideas that you've taken from Sara, which one could you adopt for the following week? Which one is going to be your new habit?
I liked the third clip we heard, which was redefining failure and asking myself, what have I failed at this week? Good.
Yeah.
So a little bit like, Yoko, with difficulty being celebrated. Let's now reflect on what I failed at, embrace it, acknowledge it, and see that as just part of the journey that you're going on. That's a lot of fun. And it's great to high five that as you go past it, instead of letting it be a distraction. What about you, Mike? Which one is going to be your sort of homework for the next week?
Oh, I take I'm really drawn to the idea of going into the unknown, right?
Yes.
And just doing the work, doing your best every day, and knowing that there are questions that are yet to be answered, but that you find the capacity. I mean, she was still selling fax machines for 2 years before she had the Spanx idea. I find that so impressive. Like, wow, what a great job on her part, right?
What a great lesson, again, in resilience. Yeah. You know, she did the hard work. She reflected, I'm not happy. I need something to get me out of bed in the morning. I know now what my strengths are. Now I wait. Now I wait until that idea comes to me. And that 2 years period then ended up working out for her in the long run. What a great lesson in discipline.
Yeah, an incredible story. And, you know, I'm very thankful that you together with me have been able to put this together. So a big thank you to you, Mark, and a thank you to you, our listeners, our viewers, and our members too. Joining us here for show 261, where we got in good shape by the end of it. And that was with Sara Blakely and the story of her founding Spanx and really coming to life through facing all of the classic challenges, a lack of fulfillment, being in the wrong movie. She set the right intention. She found her groove. And as she went for 2 years waiting for the big idea to drop, she redefined failure. She was resilient. She kept on going. And as she did that, there was a world of possibilities, but also a world of the unknown. She ate it all up. She turned it around and she hit the biggest home run. Congratulations to Sara Blakely. She is really on track to becoming the best version of herself. And in doing so, she's teaching us to do it here so we can learn out loud together here on the Moonshots Podcast. That's a wrap.